So I tried to hold off and not make this video and not talk about this topic. That was my plan, but I'm giving in today because I have so many thoughts when it comes to this terrible news and this terrible situation surrounding Xbox and Microsoft and all of the goings on that happened this past week, which we all know about. And as I mentioned in my last video, I really didn't want to have to make another negative Xbox video or a negative video of any kind. And because I don't want to always just talk about Xbox in a bad light. In theory, I root for all the companies. Yes, I'm a Nintendo fan, but I'm a Sony and a PlayStation fan, and theoretically an Xbox fan too, because I've loved them all for decades. But at this point, Xbox almost leaves me or any content creator no choice. Like, there isn't good news to talk about if you're going to talk about Xbox. There just isn't. There's never good news for Xbox. And so here we are again talking about all these terrible things that happened from the company this past week, and I blame them 99% for all of these bad things. Bad business decisions, bad business practices, just poor morals even, if you look at it from that perspective. It's just really terrible, but you can probably also tell from the title of this video that I'm trying to approach it from a little bit different lens than a lot of people by making a comparison to the tragically canceled Perfect Dark, which breaks my heart, you guys have no idea, to Metroid Prime 4 and how Nintendo has handled the crazy development of that game. Just to jump into a couple of initial knee-jerk thoughts and opinions surrounding the Microsoft thing. I mean, it sucks for all the reasons that we know it sucks. And we know the big news. They closed down the initiative, the studio that I would think was the one making Perfect Dark. They canceled Perfect Dark and Everwild, the new game that Rare was making, which we didn't really know anything about but like a random teaser trailer like 8 years ago or whenever we saw Everwild. I don't even remember. That was so freaking long ago. There was like a cartoon deer running through a forest or something. I should have actually rewatched it before making this video, and I didn't, so forgive me, guys. But, you know, they canceled those two games, and I'm an old school guy. You guys know me. N64 is my favorite console of all time. I love the original Perfect Dark, and I was so excited for this new one. The gameplay footage they showed us last year had me just jumping for joy. I was freaking out. It looked so amazing. So they closed the studio. They canceled two high-profile exclusive titles. Hello, I've been beating the frickin' drum, sounding the alarms about the death of exclusives and why exclusive content matters for like years, even though a lot of people on the internet push back. I think it's mostly younger gamers who don't actually understand why it's a valuable thing, but either way, they canceled those games. But worst of all is laying off 9,000 people, almost 10,000 people, right? If you round up. That's disgusting. That's terrible. And the reason it's disgusting and terrible, beyond the obvious, is the fact that Microsoft, who owns Xbox, is a $1 trillion company. They could afford to reorganize and reorganize their structure, reorganize their projects, their game plan and their business model, while still keeping on the people who work for you and just moving them to the new projects. But instead, you let them go because you're greedy and you're terrible and you're awful and nobody likes you. So to talk about the Perfect Dark thing again, because that's really the purpose of this, right? Is I wanted to compare Perfect Dark and Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, the game that is going to be the greatest game ever made in human history, undeniably. I'm a huge Perfect Dark fan, like I said. I love the original on the Nintendo 64 because I'm an old man who grew up playing the NES and the SNES and the Genesis. And so the 64 came out when I was 16, and I made a video about this like last year or whatever. And it became my favorite console of all time, even though there's no Metroid game on it, and it might seem silly to a lot of you guys. But I explained it in that video. It is what it is. It's my nostalgia. Love the N64. Rare, of course, had its golden era on the 64, and Perfect Dark was one of the premier titles that they made for the Nintendo 64. And everyone loved it, and I loved it. And Perfect Dark Zero, right, was the one that launched the 360. What a weird game that was. It was not really great, but it was still exciting at the time. But this new one looked fantastic, man. And, you know, comparing the Perfect Dark development and cancellation to Metroid Prime 4 is not like a revolutionary idea that's popped up in these past few days. Like, other people have already kind of talked about this online. I was even a part of a very short like tweet thread with OJ from Player Essence and RGT85, where we just kind of talked about that very, very briefly and made some of those comparisons. I think OJ was the first one I saw who actually said it in that tweet thread. And I basically just agreed with him, like, yeah, Nintendo has clearly handled the crazy development of Metroid way better than Microsoft and Xbox has handled what's been happening with Perfect Dark, hence the cancellation of the game. And so I'm not sharing anything revolutionary. Like I said, I'm just kind of adding my 2 cents into this conversation and this comparison. We have to look at the fact that Perfect Dark was announced several years ago with basically just a CG trailer, and it was exciting. And it didn't take long until we then saw a really impressive gameplay clip last year. So that was a good sign. I was like, whoa, I thought it was going to be 10 freaking years before we saw gameplay for that game. And it turned out to just happen last year in 2024. And since this cancellation happened this past week, a lot of people started to question, oh, is that gameplay even real? That gameplay demo looked fake. Or it's not indicative of the final product, or it was a fake out because Microsoft clearly wasn't running things well behind the scenes and the game was always going to be canceled, and they lied to us when they showed that to us. It is worth noting that one of the people who actually worked on it has come out since the cancellation, and I think this is a fellow who also got laid off. I'm so sorry if I'm getting that wrong. And if you did get laid off, I'm also sorry, because that sucks and it shouldn't have happened. But he came out and clarified that it actually kind of was real and it was in engine. And that there's an IGN article that kind of covers some of what he said. And just to kind of read some of it, he said, it is actually in engine. I was one of 3 level designers that worked on it. It worked best if you played it the way the person playing in the video plays it, but it still worked even if you didn't hit the marks perfectly. He went on to say there's some fake stuff in it, and the real gameplay system shown off worked just enough to look good in this video. We were rapidly making real design decisions so as to not knowingly lie to players about what the game will be. The parkour is all real, the hacking and deception is mostly real. And he went on to say some other stuff, and I'll link that video below so you can kind of get an idea of what he said. And my heart goes out to him and the people working on that game, especially those of you that lost your jobs. I guess all of them lost their jobs then because they closed the studio down. God, this whole thing sucks. Damn it, Microsoft, you're so dumb, and I just don't like you. And again, a lot of this also comes down to the fact that the way I see it, Microsoft has just been running a really poor Xbox gaming business for a long time. Obviously, going back to the Xbox One, I think it got even worse in a lot of ways in the Series X era. And I have a Series X. I even like a Series X, you know? I'm a huge Halo fan. It's one of my favorite franchises. I like Starfield. I know most people don't, but I really like it. I own these games physically. Indiana Jones was amazing. I know it's on PlayStation now, surprise, but it was a fantastic game that I played on the Xbox when it was brand new. And so, you know, we look at what Microsoft has done. They spent, just in the past few years alone, between Bethesda and Activision, they spent almost $80 billion with a B dollars to buy these companies that, in theory, you get all this great IP and all these great franchises and all this talent, people who make games, by buying these studios. And then you should be like, wow, now we own Call of Duty. We own the Elder Scrolls. We own Fallout. We own Starfield. Yada, yada, yada. Indiana Jones. And so I guess, yes, some of them, maybe like Call of Duty, you allow to go to your competitors' platforms. But in theory, you should buy that to keep a lot of it exclusive, to bolster your brand, and to sell people your hardware. I know your games and Game Pass are available on PC and Steam as well, too, and that's fine. But as far as the console space, try to sell people your Xboxes by doing that. I mean, if you're making another Xbox next year like you're telling us you are, do something with that. You spent $80 billion to do that. If you could afford to spend $80 billion on a couple of game studios, you should A, know what to do with those purchases, and B, that means you should have enough money to keep your staff. You don't send 10,000 people out into the job market in the same field on the same day and hope that they're okay. Those people are going to struggle big time. As a working man who's 13 or 14 years into my own career, and I love my job, and it pays me well enough to take care of my wife and our household, if I was to get laid off tomorrow suddenly, it would be devastating, crushing to our livelihood. So I cannot imagine what all these people who just suddenly got laid off, 10,000 people got laid off after all the hard work they've been doing for this company, working on games Microsoft was going to cancel anyway. Microsoft, a $1 trillion company, by the way. I can't imagine what they're going through. And I feel terrible. And layoffs aren't even new. It's just a part of gaming the past 15, 20 years, more than ever before. It's really embarrassing, really sad, and it makes it hard to like and enjoy and support this industry. Now, this of course brings me to a little bit more of the fun stuff. I know I'm doing a lot of ranting because I'm just upset about all of this. Whether I'm selfishly upset because a video game I was excited for got canceled, or whether I'm just morally upset from the perspective of just caring about my fellow person and somebody who had a job, felt secure, and then suddenly lost it, and now they don't know what they're going to do, right? So the people getting laid off, it's just horrible. Nintendo clearly did a great job handling the kookiness of Metroid Prime 4's development. And, you know, we all know it. It's been covered ad nauseum over the last 8 years, including by me, because I've been talking about it since the day it was first revealed in June of 2017 at E3, that the game was announced. We didn't know anything about it. And then a year and a half after it was announced in January 2019, Nintendo addressed us by saying, hey, this hasn't been going well. This other team, who we all speculate to be Bandai Namco, but has never been confirmed, this other team that was making Metroid Prime 4, it's not going well, so they're not making the game anymore. We're going to give it to Retro Studios, who's going to start over from scratch, right? We all know the infamous 2019 video where Nintendo says this is what's happening, and it was like, whoa, devastating news, because we hoped the game was coming sooner than later. Learning that the game was getting restarted means we had to wait that much longer for the game than we already were planning to. There was good news in the sense that it was giving back to Retro Studios, who famously made the original Metroid Prime trilogy. And as many of you already know, Metroid Prime 1 on the GameCube is my number one favorite game of all time. So that was good news, but it just meant that something was going horribly wrong with the development, to the point that Nintendo, one of the most secretive and proud companies ever in the history of video games and tech, literally came to us and told us, face to face, through our screens, but you know what I mean, face to face, that things just went really bad and they're going to restart it again. They're not going to cancel it like Microsoft canceled Perfect Dark and closed the studio down. They're going to restart it, give it to another team, and they're going to make sure Metroid Prime 4 is the best it could possibly be. And so here we are. Last year, they finally revealed the game running on the Nintendo Switch 1, and it looked amazing. And then this year, they confirmed that there was a next-generation version that runs in 4K, 60 frames per second, or 1080, 120 frames per second on the next-generation Nintendo Switch 2. They gave us 17 minutes of incredible next-generation video game footage. They're using mouse Joy-Cons. It was euphoric. I made a 40-minute breakdown of that thing. It is so cool. So where Microsoft and Xbox failed Perfect Dark, and fans of Perfect Dark like you and me, Nintendo has only done right by Metroid, by Samus, and by us, the fans. Of course, every video game development scenario is going to be unique and different, so who knows what other external factors behind the scenes made it harder for Perfect Dark to make release, and maybe made it easier for Metroid to make release. Who knows what those factors could be, so I do want to at least leave a little space to bring that up. But at the end of the day, when you're a trillion-dollar company, Microsoft, and you have an Xbox brand, and you've got this big game you've announced and showed gameplay for only last year, you could make that game get completed. And the fellow whose comments I was reading said, yeah, we were like working on the game. And the gameplay looked good. People were excited. I was excited. So sure, maybe there were some things making it harder to get Perfect Dark to the finish line, but it wouldn't have been impossible. Hell, if you would have had to restart that game, just like Nintendo did with Metroid. Nintendo succeeded where Xbox failed. That's what it comes to when comparing these two specific games. And it sucks for the fans. It sucks more for the people working on the game, and it sucks more for the 9,000 people who were laid off and the studio that got shut down. And all I see is evidence that Microsoft and Xbox is a poorly run business. They're spending money to buy studios they clearly can't afford. Instead of laying off one person like a Phil Spencer, they lay off 9,000 people. There's a great chance that Phil Spencer's salary alone is half or more than the amount of money saved by laying off 9,000 people. I mean, I can't say that I know the numbers for sure, but if you know the corporate business structure, and that's a structure I work in pretty high up, there's a great chance that what I'm saying is pretty damned true. So you lay off all those people. Game Pass, I don't care what anyone says, it's a bad business model. It's bad for developers who put their games on it. It's bad for Microsoft and their business. And it's even bad for the consumer because paying $300 a year to not own your games, it may seem like a good deal on the surface, but it's actually a smokescreen. It's snake oil. It's actually bad for you and your wallet. It just is. You can spend it. I don't want to tell people how to spend their money, but I do think you should reevaluate what the value of Game Pass truly is, and maybe you'll see things differently. So that's all I want to say about that. Game Pass is bad. Microsoft can't afford things. They don't care about laying off people who work hard for them. And they're just not a great business. And they don't care about exclusives anymore. How long until Halo goes to PlayStation and Switch? It's going to happen in the next year or two, I think, man. It's inevitable at this point. And so, yeah, I think I've said what I have to say. I think my brain just hit the wall and said, yeah, man, you've emptied your head of every thought you have to say. Metroid Prime 4 is going to be amazing. Thank you, Nintendo and Retro Studios, for sticking to it and committing to that game. You announced it, just like Microsoft announced Perfect Dark. You ran into problems, just like Microsoft did with Perfect Dark. But you course-corrected, you addressed us, the fans, and you committed to delivering an amazing-looking Metroid game. That game is crossing the finish line in 2025. Whereas Microsoft, you ran into problems, you threw your hands up in the air, you closed the studio, you laid people off, and you canceled the game. I mean, what are we doing here? Look at the two different options in front of you, man. It ain't even freaking close. Thank God for Nintendo. Microsoft, I've been rooting for you. I want to be a fan, but you make it impossible to root for you, and you make it damn near impossible to be a fan. So that's the state of things. These are my opinions. Share your thoughts on this insane situation below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.